All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is Ryan Derks. I am really happy that you are watching because this is something I've been working on for a while. Today, we've got Brett Tolman. He's live streaming with us right now, and this is one that I've been working on for a while. Obviously, with all the drama going on in the world of criminal justice and police reform, everyone has been, not everyone, but people send me private messages, especially the people who like to, kind of razz someone running for an office and ask them, okay, where do you stand on the police? So before I just blurt out opinions or something like that, I try to talk to professionals, and a lot of them are on Twitter, and as chaotic as Twitter can be, you can find some really, really awesome people on there. I have contacted and become internet friends with Brett, and he has agreed to come on today and talk about his work. Brett used to be a U.S. attorney, and he is now focusing his career on more criminal justice work. And obviously, with all the drama in the news right now, this is something he is an expert on. So Brett, again, thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So without wasting much time, we'll get right into some of the topics that we talked about. The first one I'll ask about is, this is what you wrote with the Federalist Society. And in fact, this is the one that when you published this, I thought, this might be a really good idea to reach out to him. For those of you who don't know, Federalist Society is a group of nationwide attorneys in the U.S. Who are, pretty constitutional minded. And here, Brett and Arthur wrote this article. We don't need to abolish the police. We need to do fundamental reform to the institution. And I think I had it highlighted here. But what was your general overview of the article here, in your opinion, Brett?
Well, there's countless people now and pockets of people throughout the country that are calling for defunding the police. And they, that varies. If you ask somebody to describe what they mean, it varies from someone that says, defund them, just take away all resources, get rid of or abolish the police. And replace it with, community representatives or something of that nature. To others that say, we want you to scale down or scale back what they actually engage on, cut their funding. It seems like the latter is more popular. But if you go into the communities themselves and even into our, communities of color, they will clearly tell you they do not want abolishing the police. They're very concerned about that. But at the same time, these are the same, communities that have experienced over-policing and over-criminalization and have felt the real effects. And nobody that has studied criminal justice in this country could say with a straight face that our communities of color haven't been impacted more negatively than others. And it's a raging debate, but I tried to make, with Arthur, we tried to make the point, you can make some systemic changes. You can stop requiring them to respond where they don't have expertise. Police officers are often responding when they have no ability or expertise to respond to someone who has mental issues, someone who is addicted to drugs. So you can certainly change that. I was very glad to see the president's executive order actually include incentivizing police officers to be with professionals, healthcare and mental health professionals when they go out and respond. So that and training and differences in training, there are measures then that can be taken. And until we do that, until we focus on what really works, a cry for just abolishing the police is going to be counterproductive, and you see what it's doing to the country right now.
Absolutely, and that is, you say more training. That's something, I believe it's in 1 week or 2 weeks, I've got a presentation for an entire police department here in the city, and that's one of the things I want to ask them is, okay, you guys, professionals, activists, people keep saying more training. What do you guys think? Are you guys lacking training? And if so, specifically, what type? Like hand-to-hand? I mean, like for example, I like to, for almost a year now, I've been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's a very hand-to-hand combat. But when you know the pressure points and the twists and the muscular system, how little force it actually takes to get someone to just stop.
I'm sure there could be improvement in that. I'd be interested. I'd like to hear what they say, but my prediction is that they say they have a lot of training.
Okay.
But I believe that we have to re-envision what training is. Their vision of training is almost exactly how you described. It's how to confront a dangerous situation. No question that is needed. I do think they get quite a bit of the training. What we don't see is mindset training and differences, de-escalation training in a way that might prevent or might have let them respond in a better manner.
Okay.
You've seen recent videos. All of us can sort of look at the training. Officers will say, "We train all the time." That we do a lot of that, but it has always been in sort of a very confrontational type training. And if we did a combination of eliminating who they have to respond to and on what kinds of cases they respond to, while at the same time teaching them de-escalation in a manner that is useful to them. We still got to preserve their lives. My father was a peace officer. I have a future son-in-law who's a SWAT member here in Utah, and I was afraid when he went out on the riots, and 20 plus of his fellow officers were injured just a few nights ago. And so we still have to keep them safe, but we certainly can do more. Because you see it. You see those videos, you see how officers are responding, you see the ones that seem to get it and know what they're doing, and then you see the ones that have no business being out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really I was here in Kansas City. There were 6 consecutive nights of protesting, and maybe all but one of them got pretty violent. And I was there for 5 of the 6 nights, and I talked to probably a dozen protesters on one day with my live streaming. Live streamed 4.5 hours, in fact.
Wow.
But I talked to the police also, and what really stuck with me is even the police were saying, "Look, man, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. They're making this job terrible for us."
Absolutely. So, every officer I've spoken to, really, they will tell you, we want. When I was U.S. attorney, for example, Ryan, I had 2 police chiefs reach out to me as U.S. attorney and say, "Hey, I know this isn't something you do all the time, but could you be a third party and come in and investigate this officer for me? Because
Wow.
I really need somebody to take a look at it, and I want the community to know that we are taking it seriously." And that changed my perspective. I started to see officers, they really do want to weed out the bad officers.
Yep. Okay, now let me get into a few more nitty-gritty details of what reform and improvement can look like. This one is probably maybe one of the most controversial, so let's start right off from it. Okay, so Cato, usually a pretty classically liberal conservative outlet. I don't know if you saw this, but Cato put this piece together about ending qualified immunity. And they've actually got some decent arguments in here. And qualified immunity, as far as I can tell right now, seems to be pretty political. As far as right down the line. People on the left seem to like it. A lot of people on the right don't seem to like it. What's your take on qualified immunity?
So qualified immunity is absolutely something that we need to take a strong look at. There's a couple of bills right now, both Republican have a few, and Democrats have a few that are trying to, rein in what qualified immunity has become. It was truly a product of the Supreme Court. They just kind of made it up in response to Congress passing 1983 law, which allows a citizen to bring a civil claim against a state or government actor who might have violated their rights. The Supreme Court, what they did was, in essence, gut the ability to hold a police officer responsible for violating someone's civil rights. And so the police organizations, the unions, they desperately want to keep the qualified immunity because it extends massive amount of protection to their officers, and they feel like at times they're unfairly targeted and they have an impossible job, and so they want to keep it in place. But you now have Republicans and conservatives and liberals who are both saying something has to be done. if you get away from the organizations, if you get away from the police fraternities, if you get away from the police unions, and you get to the heart of the those in the trenches, they will say that if a cop commits a crime, or if a cop violates someone's rights and does so knowingly, willfully does it, they don't want him to be their fellow officer. They don't want him in the force. And so that's where this is sort of bubbling up, is people are starting to realize, and frankly, Ryan, there are some horrific cases out there. There's a case coming out of Minnesota just a few years ago. The officer indicated that he was afraid for his life, and so he used deadly force. When they drilled down on what was it that caused him to be afraid, he concluded it was the smell of marijuana, and that was it. Now, that served as a reasonable basis, according to the court, for the officer to be afraid. And so after making that finding, then he's able to use deadly force. You see a case like that and you go, wait, that's
right.
not where the framers of our Constitution wanted. I mean, if anything, they wanted heightened ability to hold government accountable, not less ability.
Very true. So then would you say some reform of qualified immunity, but not complete repeal of qualified immunity?
Well, if people weren't so afraid of their prospects for getting elected, if police officers weren't being attacked right now, and there's such a fear, and it is reasonable, there's a fear by police officers that they also can be harmed. That's if we could somehow back away from the emotion of what's happening, we would get to the same place, I believe, all of us. And I think that would be getting rid of qualified immunity, but it would also allow for a presumption that if an officer, for example, follows policies that he was trained on, then we don't hold that individual officer responsible. We hold those who adopted those poor policies. And if you have an officer who did not follow policies and conducted himself either criminally or willfully to violate someone's rights, then they should be held responsible.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and a lot of the people who are really against that I see in the comments section online, obviously, because that's like the best place to find wisdom is in the comments section. I see a lot of people commenting about how nice it must be to be double protected from the police union and qualified immunity. So obviously those are comments of people who do not like qualified immunity. But that's another question I'm going to ask when I talk to this police unit here, like I said, in like 10 days or so.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's interesting. I like your take on that. Now, I'm sure you saw this. Here's what Justin Amash said, and this was, almost a month ago. Here, Justin Amash tweeted, end qualified immunity, end civil asset forfeiture, end the drug war, end overcriminalization, end no-knock warrants, end militarization of police, end mandatory minimums. Anything you find controversial there?
Well, let's hit each one. We already talked about qualified immunity, but real quick on each one. So civil asset forfeiture, very few people know that right now in this country, they can keep the property that they forfeit, that they take from you, even if you're acquitted. So they can do it. So does there need to be something done there? Absolutely. And it's become a source of funding that government has become addicted to. And the drug war, don't know exactly what he all the details of what he was referring to, but it was no question we lost the drug war. And drugs have won the drug war, no doubt. Yeah, and we have, in essence, as a result of it, and this hits the last one on his list, mandatory minimums. As a result, we have passed very brutal punishment statutes of mandatory minimums in the drug area, and so you're warehousing people at $30,000 to $50,000 per year, and they're serving 20, 30. I prosecuted several cases in which they served some life in prison. I have a client right now I'm trying to assist in getting a clemency who was sentenced to 835 years in federal prison. He's served 20 so far.
Wow.
And this was nonviolent crime. So we have really swung the pendulum far on the statutes themselves, thinking that we were going to get tough on crime. The drug war, we were going to go after them. But what happened was we were able to be really tough on really low level individuals in the drug, distribution.
Right. Yeah, the poorest people who couldn't afford to defend themselves.
That's right.
Okay.
And then you look at his over-criminalization. Senator Lee from Utah, a friend of mine, and several other senators that I've kind of worked with over the years, absolutely this is needed. And if you take just the federal system, Ryan, there were a couple thousand criminal statutes when Reagan was president. From then to now, there's nearly 6,000 federal criminal statutes, and there's over 300,000 regulations with criminal penalties.
Yep.
So we now criminalize everything, state and federal, and we're just ballooning that criminal code. And a lot of people don't see the downside. They say, well, we want to be tough on crime. We want a crime-free society. But what this does, when you're a prosecutor and you have all that power, you want to use all the tools that you have. And so pretty soon you're looking for ways and opportunities to prosecute as many people as you can, because you can.
Absolutely. That completely makes sense.
The militarization, or the 1033 issue, is the funding and pumping of money into bringing the police almost quasi, military force that's ready. Now, the other side of that argument, Ryan, is, look, bad guys are not getting softer, and they're getting, better weapons, tougher to deal with. So we need to up our game.
Yeah. In fact, I've gotten that exact argument. From police officers.
Yeah. The problem you have is when you expand the criminal code, and then you also create a paramilitary force. What do you think what pressure is being applied to your communities, and what do they start to feel? What do they start to feel? They feel like this is a police state. And we're very
when you see that Operation Iraqi Freedom half-track, 8-wheeled platoon machine thing that says sheriff on the side, and you're like, I don't know. This feels really weird. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's interesting. So you, generally speaking, Mr. Amash seems pretty accurate.
Yeah, he's conservative, but he's libertarian, and he wants to see government, stop growing. And at my core, I do. I agree with that. Agreed. I don't always agree with Amash on everything, but on this issue, the criminal justice issue, he's figured out some things that a lot of other people are struggling still to understand.
Yeah. I find that a lot right now, especially with the sentiments and the protests and the demands right now, is that a lot of people talk about these institutional problems or these systemic problems, but it seems very shallow, surface level arguments. A lot of people aren't going 20, 30, 40 years back and looking at these different laws that have been put in place that have caused this situation. It seems like a lose-lose situation right now. Absolutely. Okay, so let me move on to this next one here. Let's see. So we were going to talk about the legislation that just got put through about a week ago. This was the House Democrats' version of police reform, called it the Justice in Policing Act of 2020. Now, are you very familiar with this one? I was actually going to ask you about the Republicans' Senate bill, but are you very familiar with this one?
Yeah, a little bit. I've looked at both bills, on the Senate side and the House, and looked at what Senator Scott is working on.
Right. So let me see, and I'll just go through a few of the bullet points. Okay, on this one here, they work to end racial and religious profiling. I guess that makes sense. Save lives by banning chokeholds.
The racial profiling, though, it's already against the law.
Okay. So it's a little redundant
here. What they do, if you look at the Democrats, they always want to pass more crimes, like hate crimes, in order to to cause, public, I guess, to say, oh, it's even more criminal than it already is. That's how these more crimes get passed often. They want either stiffer penalties, or they want to say they're being tough on crime, so they'll pass more. The racial profiling is already illegal in this country. The Supreme Court has already indicated it is. The concern that I have is how broad they're drafting a lot of this. They're really trying to send political messages to tie the hands of police officers in many ways. You don't want them profiling based on race, but look at some of the details of what they actually draft. They suggest in those areas, and you'll see why you're not going to get very many conservatives on board, because police will never back it.
Makes sense. Limit military equipment on American streets and require body cameras. I'm pretty open to that. I like that.
Yep.
Hold police accountable in court. I think this has to do with perhaps eliminating qualified immunity. Okay, we talked about that.
Yep.
Investigate police misconduct. Empower our communities to reimagine public safety. Now, again, that's a lot of word salad. It doesn't seem like anything that has
that could be anything. That could be defunding. That could be creating, community, community response personnel instead of the police. I'm not sure of the details of what they are on.
Right, and again, this is just a very 2-page. I think the actual bill is a few hundred pages, so clearly you're not going to get all the details.
There's more in there. Let me tell you.
Yeah, and I've been reading a lot of bills. I read one just the other day. It was a one-topic bill. Actually, surprisingly, it was a one-topic bill, and it was still like 72 pages, I think. So, okay, last 3. Change the culture of law enforcement with training to build integrity and trust. Improve transparency by collecting data on police misconduct and use of force. And then make lynching a federal crime. Okay.
Read the description down there. It's pretty interesting.
Of which one? Lynching?
Yeah.
It makes it a federal crime to conspire to violate existing federal hate crime laws. All right, so you just described that a minute ago. So we're just going to confirm that it's against the law.
A little bit, and that is there's a current problem right now that police officers and police chiefs have talked to me about. They will get somebody and they'll investigate a police officer and misconduct, and right before they are going to reprimand or discipline, they'll quit. And currently, if they do that, then they're able to leave, and before they get a bad finding on their record, they'll go to another police department.
Actually, I'm glad that you asked that, because that's actually the exact next question. It's not listed on here, and I don't know that it's in the Republicans' version of the Senate, but what do you think of a nationwide registry for police officers? Because, for example, in my industry of investments, there's what's called the broker check, and it's in the FINRA, which is a federal, technically a self-regulated entity, but it doesn't matter which firm I go to, my record is always there for the public to go check, and they can see anytime I've had complaints or lawsuits or anything like that. What about something like that for the police? It seems reasonable.
So I would be in support of better data collection on investigations and sharing of those. Now, a registry, as long as there's sufficient due process for the officer that they could, remove their name if if there was a problem in the investigation or whatever.
Yeah.
I would just want to make sure that there is sufficient due process, because you may affect his ability to get his or her ability to get a job. But having said that, we don't do a good job of collecting that data. And one thing I do know for certain, prosecutors are not always great at sharing that information with defense counsel. And so if they don't share it with defense counsel in a criminal case, they're probably not also sharing it with other police departments, and they're probably not sharing it with the public in any way. And so we do need to collect data better on it, and we do need to share it with the public.
Okay, very cool. Okay, so now back to the bill, the Senate Republican version of police reform. I don't have something that's clean and nice to look. I just have what I've got written here. They say make lynching a federal crime. We already talked about that. Mm-hmm. Training of law enforcement on the history of racism. Increased funding for body cameras. Now, real quick, yes or no? Do you like body cameras? I think I do.
I do. Yeah, I absolutely like body cameras. I tried for years to get the FBI to require interviews, for example, to be videoed, and they they won't do it. They do have a policy that they can do it now, but they still refuse to video interviews. And you saw what happened with General Flynn. That's not videoed. It's the notes of one agent taking down what he thinks is being conveyed. That's a real problem, but it goes to the heart of the body cam issue, and that is, look, if we have the technology and it's there and it can answer, it's not always perfect, but it can answer a lot. And look what it exposed on, so many cases so far.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Yeah, the Mike Flynn case, if that does not go down in history as a botched criminal investigation, I don't know what will.
Yep, it's well said.
But yeah, I think time will tell on that, because Sidney Powell does not seem to be letting off the gas on that one yet.
No, I'm shocked we still don't have the judge having dismissed it after the appellate court did what they did.
Right. Okay, a few more points. An increase in record retention. We talked about that. Mm-hmm. Banning sexual abuse by law enforcement. Is that not already some type of?
Yeah, it's already a crime. Okay. I imagine that is an effort to try to clarify to the departments of the position, but I mean, banning it, I don't know why you have to ban something that's criminal.
Right. Funding for training for alternate use of force, de-escalation, and duty to intervene. We already briefly talked about that.
Yep.
And then finally, at least one, there could be more, but at least this last one, increase the penalties for false police reporting. That would be huge, and that's not something I heard on the Democrat bill.
Yeah, they don't have that. And you'll notice the big criticism of the Scott bill is they in turn don't have anything on chokeholds, and they don't have anything on the qualified immunity or something of that nature to help or assist in holding them responsible. So, it is a proper discussion though, and you see there's a lot that they're similar on. There's a lot of areas they could build on it, but the politics are so bad right now, they can't even get in the room to talk about it.
Yeah, right. And truthfully, if a bill like this gets passed, it probably won't be until after the election, if one of the parties takes over both sides, don't you think?
Anything that's substantial, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, right, for sure. Okay, so last thing I've got for you here. This one's a super curveball, and I really just threw it in because I had no clue. I never had even considered this. I'd never seen anyone even write about it on the internet, but I'm going to play this little 30-second clip, and I want your hot take on this, okay?
Yep.
I believe in disbanding and defunding city police. Now, since I'm a conservative, you might find that surprising. However, look at what the Founding Fathers had to say on the subject. The city police are a great example of a modern standing army. As you can see, the Founding Fathers warned us about having standing armies. Obviously, I do not believe in eliminating law enforcement altogether. Rather, I believe in transferring all authority to the county sheriff's department. Unlike city police, the county sheriff's department is mandated by the Constitution. Not only that, but the sheriff is an elected position and is therefore accountable to the people, not any certain individual in power. This is a very different dynamic than the police chief, who is accountable only to the mayor. The sheriff is therefore primarily concerned with the welfare of the people and keeping his officers accountable to them. In this model, the officers are held accountable to the people, and the people are held accountable to the law. I believe in...
Is that crazy?
No, it's not crazy. I used to think similar thoughts when I was in my 20s and 30s. And it's not that it's wrong. It's just what is the reality of what's doable? What's really doable? Can we get Congress, for example, to do something like that? Probably not, ever. Even though I really agree with staying as close and adhering to the Constitution as we can. I think the strength of the argument is the accountability factor. Sheriffs are elected, and I've loved my interactions with sheriff. They're some of the best law enforcement officers in the country, and they are a very proud unit across this country. But there's also some bad apples, just like in anything else. Police officers would argue that they are, the police chief is accountable to the mayor, and the mayor is elected, and so you have this similar accountability. But I think if you could do it, if you could disband police, you would have to. There have been some folks that have come similar to this. I don't know if you saw what happened in Baltimore, but when they defunded several years ago in a massive way, most all of the officers that they, terminated went to the sheriff's office or to the state police, and so they kind of stayed in their law enforcement role. I don't think that it was done properly, and it wasn't done for constitutional reasons, but it certainly hasn't helped in all of the violence that's going on right now in Baltimore.
Okay. Well, hey, Brad, that's all I got for you right now. I'm going to let you get back to your day. This is not a finished issue for me. I clearly have a lot more. And plus, like I said, I've got the police department I'll be talking with here in like 10 days or so. So
yeah, I'm interested.
I'll keep in touch with you on Twitter, and we'll see if we can't keep going back and forth, and I'll keep tweeting questions at you, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Ryan. It was enjoyable.
All right. You bet. Everybody, take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. All right. Thanks. Bye.